Step into love like you've never been hurt before. Step into trust like you've never been burned before.
Hello and welcome to Braveheart Conversations,
where we learn the art of love through brave and compassionate conversations. I am Jillian Landis.
and I'm Marie Wallace.
And we are your hosts today. Hi everybody, I'm so excited to be back. I just got back from Hawaii, so pardon me if I'm a little bit flustered today. I'm a little bit jet lagged, but we are here today with Braveheart Conversations. I'm Jillian Aurora, and I'm here with my beautiful co-host,
Marie Wallace, and I'm a little hoarse. We'll be a pair today.
Yes, but we made it. We're here, we're dedicated. So wherever you're tuning in from, thank you so much for joining us today, whether you are on Podbean or Spotify or Facebook Live. If you haven't found us yet on Facebook, you can do so by visiting facebook.com/group/Braveheart Conversations. And we'd love for you to join us there and to see any updates. And we always go live with our newest podcast episode every week on Thursdays. So we're super happy to be here today.
Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Ashley.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Okay, so today we're going to talk about family relationships. We had a request to talk about toxic relationships, specifically with a mother figure. We're going to go ahead and expand that a little bit to family relationships overall, because it's not everybody.
They're tricky to navigate.
Yeah, for everybody. And sometimes that is with a mom, and we can talk about that a little bit. If you have any specific questions, feel free to chime in. But yeah, family relationships can be really tough because sometimes we give them a little more bandwidth than we do other relationships, and we don't hold to our standards necessarily the same. So I'm going to read a post I wrote this week about guilt tripping, because this is often an issue specifically with family members. So bear with me here for a second. If you really loved me, you would be here for me. If you really loved me, you wouldn't abandon me. If you really loved me, you would choose to spend the evening with me instead of with your friends. If you really loved me, you would see how much I'm suffering and let me slide a little on rent. If you really loved me, you would spend your money to help me instead of spending, saving, or investing in yourself. If you really loved me, you would know I'm triggered by your hobby, interest, work, passion, etc., and you would give it up for me. If you really loved me, you would stop inconveniencing me with your needs. If you really loved me, you would stop having these hard conversations with me because you know they trigger me. Guilt tripping. These statements are often the reactions we experience when we try to set boundaries. They are the stealthy bombs that test us to see if we will back down. They are the moment of truth. Will you have your own back, or will you continue to allow me to use you? These are the buttons we have sticking out so far and so easily pushed and triggered. Often, we are unconscious of their very existence, and we are owned by them like puppets on a string. Guilt, shame, blame. So if you're tired of being railroaded, and you're tired of trying to set boundaries and then wondering what happened, it's time to unravel that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do a little unraveling today.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. So those are some of the responses I've had from a variety of relationships. It could be family, it could be friends, romantic partners. Really, that's a very common pushback, because there's this underlying fear that we've talked about before, this belief that it's bad to be selfish. And so really, when we get that guilt tripping, they're pushing on that button. Mm-hmm. They're saying, well, you're really being selfish for setting this boundary with me. If you weren't so selfish, you'd let me keep taking advantage of you.
Sounds so logical when you say it that way.
Yeah, and it's really it's a mind fuck. It's a play on words. It's twisting the truth, because in reality, they're being very selfish by taking from you. So it's interesting how that works. And I think a lot of that goes back to entitlement, which we'll kind of touch on. The family often feels entitled.
Because I'm the mom, or I'm the dad, or I'm, family feels that a lot.
Yeah, and when I talk about entitlement, there are some things that we are naturally entitled to. Like I'm entitled to myself, right? And this can become
my time
an issue.
And resources. Right.
This can become an issue if I believe I'm not entitled to myself, which is actually where these buttons start getting pushed, is if I have a core belief that I actually am not entitled to my time or my space or my resources or my body, then we get into some issues, because then I feel guilty if I'm not giving myself away. Whereas other times, family members believe that they are entitled to me. They're entitled to my time, my effort, my energy, my resources, my body, so some of these beliefs of entitlement can really get tricky, and that is where they start pushing on these, you're so selfish, or if you really loved me then.
Well, like you said, the romantic partner as well, because society teaches us certain things, and that's where the core beliefs come from. Society usually has some kind of rule in place that we're listening to, because if you were a good woman or a good man, then you would XYZ, give of your time, give of your energy, and that's where I think some of that core belief comes from, and we feel bad or wrong or sick that we want something for ourselves. And so, those are all very, very good points.
Yep. Yeah, I think so there's an entitlement issue often is at the root of boundary setting, because when I say entitlement, it's what you have a right to. And this actually is self-worth, right?
It is self-worth.
Is I have a right to me, and nobody's going to take that from me. Nobody's going to strip me of that right. So what that ends up looking like then is, if I believe I have a right to my own time, then I'm not going to feel guilty if I say I'm taking this time
setting
for
this
myself.
boundary,
And no, I don't want to go out with you, or no, I don't want to go help you move, or no, I don't want, whatever the thing is, I don't have an issue with saying, this is what I need for me, and I have no issue taking it, because I owe myself that first. Or money. I have no issue telling someone to screw off if they are asking me for, like I had used the example of sliding on rent money, or, well, can't you give me a discount? That's another big one.
I hear that.
And so we feel these guilt trips, but when you have developed the self-worth and you have the entitlement of yourself, you know that you deserve those resources for you first.
Exactly. First. That's the primary.
Yeah, and the thing is, I might sound really harsh as I'm talking about that. Man, you're such a hard ass. You don't give anybody
sounds harsh.
Anything. It's actually the opposite.
It's what's healthy. It's a healthy way to deal with things, especially when we're in relationship with another person. Compromise can't happen. That's something that comes in later, but you have to have your own side, like your own back.
Have your own back.
And if I'm not fighting for me, then who is? And that's a healthy relationship, whether it's your family or, a romantic interest or a friend. You're finding that healthy balance between what you really need and want versus what they really need and want. And I'm pretty sure that most people, if they really sit down and think about it, are very honoring to another person. It is not wrong to want those things that for yourself. It's not being dishonoring. It's not dishonoring to fight for the things that you would like first. Doesn't mean there isn't a compromise on the horizon, but there's got to be. For compromise to happen, there has to be two sides, and you both have to be willing to see what you need and then find what's in the middle of those two.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference if If, for example, I hear a need, right? Let's say I hear there's a family who's struggling. Maybe, I have a heart for women who are getting out of domestic violence. Okay, maybe I hear a woman's taken this courageous step, and I feel inspired. I really want to help this family, and I do that however I feel inspired to do. Maybe I give them money for an apartment, or maybe I make a meal for them, or I feel inspired to do that, versus the idea that I have to. That's where the difference is. So when I'm doing something out of obligation, and I'm like, well, they need it, and it's my, whatever.
Just listen to the energy of that, because when you said inspired, it was, I get to, and the whole energy, your eyes lit up,
I'm
your
excited.
Body's excited. And anytime you feel that have to or should, you can feel your body kind of closing down. That's a really big indicator that maybe that's not a decision that you really, really want to do.
Right, and that's coming from obligation and guilt versus inspiration. So when you are having your own back, and I talk about self-betrayal a lot, when you're not in the mode of self-betrayal and you are fully taking care of all of your needs and operating in a sense of entitlement of yourself, then it empowers you to be in a place when you feel inspired. There's something that pings you and you're able to help. Instead of so many people that I've seen, and myself included, there's been many times in my life where I've been giving out of obligation. I'm empty. I'm depleted. I'm pissed off because I'm
it's not authentic either. And we talk a lot about wanting to be our best authentic selves. It's not authentic if we're giving from a place of obligation.
Yeah, I think that everybody we owe everyone and ourselves our honesty. Honesty is really important. But, if I follow, my big thing is what honors me honors everyone. What dishonors me dishonors everyone. And so if I am in a place where I'm giving resources that I'm actually entitled to, that I am operating in a place where other people are entitled to those things, I end up depleted, and I end up upset, that resentful that I'm not covering the things that I need, and it's a really icky energy. That's going to damage the relationship. Not only does it damage the relationship, but what's really interesting is when I step in savior mode, right, and I allow someone else to be entitled to my resources, I actually really dishonor them by taking away their dignity. I dishonor them by actually disbelieving that they are capable of taking care of themselves.
And disempowering.
Yeah, it's super disempowering, because I'm actually operating in a belief system where I'm not in an energy where I'm like, oh, this is an interesting situation. I wonder what good is going to come out of this. Instead, I'm in fear of what's happening, and I need to step in and rescue and save. Totally, totally different energy. So a lot of this stuff comes back to a fear of watching somebody else struggle or watching somebody else experience their own pain. And then it's much worsened when you throw on this guilt tripping from a family member or a friend or someone who thinks that they are entitled to you solving this problem for them, which comes, I think, both of these beliefs happen at the same time. So I'm generally believing I'm not entitled to my time, space, money, whatever, and you are also at the same time believing that you are entitled to all of these things. So they tango really well in a really toxic, icky way.
Very messy. Very messy.
So I do want to dig into specifically family issues where this can come up, and the question originally was parental relationships. So let's talk a little bit.
That starts at a very young age when that's ingrained in us, that family has these entitlements that we think we genuinely believe in our core that they have these entitlement issues. And
so I want to talk a little bit about our own beliefs about family that we take with us, because I feel like this cloud of what the shoulds are, the traditions, and the things that we have taken with us, the beliefs around family. And I think that there's some really big ones that when we grow up, we are somehow obligated to maintain relationships with family members, that they're entitled to being in our space even if they're mistreating us, even if they're saying rude things, even if they're being condescending, even if they're sucking energy from us.
Yeah, and they're not honoring to who we are and what we believe.
Yeah, so there's this belief system that they have to be able to stay in our space, that we are...
Or have a say.
that they're entitled to being available, or that we're supposed to be available to them, right? Whether that's for labor or time or even money. You know, I've had clients who have really expressed frustration where, you know, their parent will call them up and it's not even a question. It's, I need you to help me with groceries, or, you know, please show up with
if you are a good son or a daughter. Yeah.
And to me, it's just unbelievable. It's very dishonoring, but it is this idea of tradition and shoulds, that family is always there for each other. That's a big belief. Family's always there for each other. Family always has each other's back. But the thing is, whenever we have a relationship where we have no standards, and no matter what your behavior is, that I'm going to tolerate it, and there's absolutely nothing that you could do, that I'm going to kick you out of my space, that's a problem.
Well, it could get way out of hand too. Very scary
And
problem.
it does.
And it does.
It does. Whether that's a spouse or a parent or a sibling, there gets to be standards. And does that mean that you disown them and you kick them out of your life entirely? Not usually.
Could be
but
if they're out of,
Not usually. I mean, usually I think that we have seasons maybe where we're much more distant, where we're disconnected. But I think there's a
fear in us that we will lose that relationship. So I think the fear comes up so strongly that we're afraid to make the boundary, because if we do, we could lose relationship with them. And I think that's where we get into trouble. Without having that boundary, it could never be a healthy relationship.
Well, and I think this is with any relationship. We have to get to the point that we are willing at any cost.
Any cost.
Even losing the relationship at any cost, we're willing to have our own back. And that means, like, I am not going to accept any disrespectful or dishonoring behavior, period. So that doesn't mean I don't love them. We've talked about this before. Like, I'm still unconditionally loving them, but I can love them without them being in my space. Being in my space is a privilege. It's an earned privilege. It is not a right, not for anyone, not for a family,
anyone.
Not for a spouse, not
friend.
for a child,
No
nothing. One. We get to have that level of standards and boundaries. And the thing is, like, what I have experienced, there have been people that I have kicked out of my space for a time, family members even. And
I have to. It's a sad thing,
it's
but
tough.
very necessary.
It's tough, but what I've experienced is often in that season you think it's going to last forever. Often in that season you think it's never going to end. You're never going to have a relationship with them. It's never going to get better.
Yeah.
And what I've experienced is the more I've held to honoring myself and having boundaries, is that season does eventually evolve. And I have found that you hold people to a level, like you teach them how you're willing to be treated and what you are and are not available for. And they level up.
They do. Every time, in my experience too, every time I've been way surprised at how more wonderful the relationship feels. It feels safe. It feels secure and a lot happier because neither one of you are giving up those really important things. I wanted to also bring up that if you are hearing if and then statements, so if you're hearing if you don't or if you do this, then X will happen, that's a really big flag as well. Growing up, my dad would say, if you change your religion or if you, you leave the state. He would just have all these if-then statements. Then I'm going to disown you. So if you're hearing these if this, then this will happen, and it's threatening your relationship, it might be an indicator that you need to really seriously look at that relationship and see if it's a relationship you want in your life. Which I love my dad, and he's passed since, but I have to honor myself in that. And of course, I broke every one of those rules in my adulthood. However, it never really threatened the relationship. Was there a season that we didn't talk a lot? Yeah, and we would only talk about the weather because that felt like the thing that was safe. But eventually, over time, they can see that relationship is honoring of them as well, and also honoring of myself. And it becomes a new normal. You find your new normal of what the relationship, how it will operate. And almost every time, it's been a much better relationship, holding those boundaries than I ever could imagine or dream. So that fear's there, especially with family, because who doesn't want their family in their life? And that's a scary place, but a family at any cost is a way different.
And what I realized too is I really had to grieve fantasies, because I had like the fantasy of what these perfect relationships would look like, what a relationship with my mom would look like, or a relationship with my dad, or a relationship with siblings or spouse. And some of this is just acknowledging what is instead of the way that I want it to be. Because very often what I'm doing is I'm trying to force them to be what I want them to be, which is super dishonoring.
Which is the opposite of, you're hearing those if you loved me state, so I'm actually putting that on to my parents as well. If you loved me, then you would. So it's the same thing.
Right. And so there's some subtle differences here. So I want you to hear that the difference in boundary setting is saying, here are my standards, here's what I'm available for in my space, and I'm observing, does this person match that or not? And if they don't, it's not saying you're a terrible person, it's saying you just don't match what is required to be in my space. I love you, this just isn't a fit for me.
Exactly.
Versus having people in my space and saying, you will be up to my standards, and I will manipulate you, and I will threaten you, and I will
I'm glad you made that
you
differentiation
into fitting into my circle. Sometimes people don't fit in our circle, and boundaries is not about forcing people to be in our circle. It's about observing if they fit in our circle and then being willing to let them go if the reality shows that they're just not a fit. And it's not a judgment. It's not saying that this person is bad and I'm good. It's just saying we're different people. We have different values, and yours don't match mine, and that's okay. But I know that if I allow people in my circle that don't match my values and my standards and my requirements, I end up getting manipulative and pissed off, and I'm not the best version of me.
No.
That's dishonoring for me to continue to have people in my space that they're not honoring of my values or my standards. So I hope that is a clear distinction.
No, I agree with you. I was just saying in the fantasy, we wish that they loved us differently.
Yeah.
And so that's all I was addressing. So yeah, I'm glad you clarified that for people.
Yeah, because it does feel icky, and I've also seen that happen where family members are threatening. And you can feel that even if there isn't a threat. If, family has a certain belief system and you know that you're outside of that, then you have this fear of, I'm not going to be accepted. I'm not going to be loved if I don't share this. And so we know when that's happening. And if you feel that you being yourself is not accepted, even if they're different, that gets to be, that's one of my standards in my space.
Mine too.
Is that I value and appreciate different people and different value systems, and I require that same acceptance of myself. So if that can't be there, then I'm just not available for that person in my space.
And it doesn't mean that's forever either. It's not permanent. I mean, it's likely to be such a disconnect that it never comes back. But
It's just interesting because there's many times I have locked people into an identity or a
this is the way they'll
behavioral
always
pattern.
be.
This is the way they'll always be. They won't ever change.
That's not true.
And even the people that I have thought were the most entrenched and the most rigid, I've watched them evolve. I've watched them change. And it's not because I make myself stay in their life. It is this like acceptance of what is and saying, right now it's not appropriate for me to be in your space. But then like the miracles that I've seen where they evolve on their own. And then sometimes it is totally appropriate to reconnect later and reevaluate that relationship. And I'm really grateful to have very solid family relationships today. And the way those things have evolved is kind of crazy because I, many times in my life, never saw that happening.
Well, the last 2 years, maybe 3 years of my dad's life, I started just calling him, and I let all the past go away, and just did the here and now, being present with him, and just asking him about his life today, and no attachments, no expectations of would I be disappointed if he had to go right away? Yes. But it was just accepting him in that moment, however he was, and enjoying him for that moment, however he was. And if he didn't have time, he didn't have time. And it was an amazing relationship, how that evolved over time, and how close we became because neither one of us had these hard, fast rules. We had rules of engagement, like you and I have talked about before, and we also, and some of them were not even explicitly laid out, just understood rules, and we just enjoyed each other, and that evolved into a relationship I never expected, but certainly really wanted and got to enjoy. And so never be surprised. Well, you can be surprised. Just never underestimate that relationship can change over time.
Yeah, we're constantly changing. We're never stuck. And even the people that you perceive as the most stuck.
My dad I called him the vault. He was so, held his emotions and feelings in so tight. And so, it's kind of nice to watch them get a little bit vulnerable. And he was a hard case. So, if he can do it, anybody can.
I think age has a way of softening people. Time does have a way of shifting things and stretching people. So, don't ever give up on a family member, but also don't be afraid to let them go.
Yeah.
And that's
important.
That's so tough, but don't be afraid to let them go. And when you hold that level of uncompromising honor for yourself, no matter who it is, being willing to change the relationship, add some distance if you need to, or parameters. We've talked before about, I like to talk about a spectrum of safety, what feels safest. So maybe a minimal amount of contact, it could be only, one-way letters or one-way gifts. That's the only thing I feel safe with, all the way over to full contact. You can come to my house, I can go to your house, and I feel totally safe being vulnerable. There's a whole wide range of
engagement with each other.
Right. So we get to constantly be informing ourselves what feels best with each person. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, this is a family member and they're way over here. I only will send them one-way cards. That might be reality for a while. Maybe I don't go to family reunions. I don't go to holiday dinners. I don't, those are all okay. Those are all okay.
All okay.
There's no shoulds or have tos just because they're your family. So let's check in and see, do we have any questions here? I think we're good. If anybody has any questions, jump in now before we wrap up. I think we've covered a lot.
We did.
Specifically with mother relationships, do you have anything on that comes up for you that you'd like to share?
I don't have a relationship, so I can't really do that. But mostly, I think the one recap is just do what's honoring to you. And I like that line, what honors you honors everyone. I think that's just the number one thing, just knowing that it's okay to ask for what you would like and want, and be uncompromising about it. And it is okay to let that relationship go. It's just honoring.
You don't owe anyone anything, even if it's your mom, even if it's your dad, even if it's your own, people have adult children that, come running and expect the world. And there's nothing ickier to me than the feeling of somebody being entitled to me. It's so soul-sucking when someone comes with expectations of my time or energy or resources or body. It's off limits. That's mine to give, and nobody gets to assume that of me.
I'm really glad we had this conversation.
Me too.
It's a good conversation.
This was great. Yeah, family gets to have standards too. So, thank you guys for tuning in with us today. I'll check one more time. No questions. Okay, so thank you again for wherever you're tuning in from, whether that is Spotify or Podbean or Facebook Live. You can check us out on YouTube or our Facebook group, which is Braveheart Conversations Podcast, and that is facebook.com/group/Braveheart Conversations. So I hope you will tune in again with us next week.
Yay.
And if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear about, let us know.
We love suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely love suggestions. So you can reach me at defytheaverage@gmail.com.
And Marie at mariesgold.com.
And of course, you can also just message the Facebook group or either one of us on Facebook. So anyway, I hope you have a fabulous week, and we look forward to talking with you again next week.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Step into love like you've never been hurt before. Step into trust like you've never been burned before. Would you just open